Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Paula McCain. I'm a recovery business advisor for North Central Texas Small Business Development Center. And thank you all for joining us on what has turned out to be a nice snowy day here in North Texas, which confirms the groundhog's prediction from yesterday of 6 more weeks of winter. The SBDC is a leading provider of assistance for small businesses, and because we are grant funded, we can offer our services and our resources to you at no cost. Today's webinar, Marketing Your Business from the Driver's Seat, it will be presented by Melissa Forziad. And if you would, please put your questions in the chat room, and Melissa will get to them during her presentation. A little bit about Melissa. She's a Southern California-based marketer, speaker, consultant, and author. She teaches small businesses how to market on a budget and helps them execute their marketing strategies in addition to working with their business organizations to train their trainers. She offers keynotes, presentations, workshops, and webinars, and her national and international speaking schedule has taken her as far as New Zealand. To date, she's delivered over 120 workshops and webinars to over thousands of attendees. Before starting Melissa Forziad Events and Marketing, her career involved roles with the Olympic Winter Games, the Rugby World Cup, and the U.S. Olympic Committee. This must be a wonderful time of the year for you, Melissa. You're an author of a free ebook, Small Business Marketing on a Budget. Melissa, thanks so much for joining us today. We love having you.
Thank you for having me. Let me just take a moment here and make sure that my screen is showing. And thank you so much for not only for the introduction and for having me. This is the third webinar in our 3-webinar series, and it's been so great to work with everybody at the North Central Texas SBDC, especially Lori Brett and Paula, for bringing me in and making sure that we're providing this information to small businesses. I appreciate that, there's so much to do in any one day when you're running a business. And so to be able to focus in on marketing for a bit of time, I'm glad you're carving it out, and hopefully that helps you to keep moving forward and hopefully generate more sales and be successful in your business and profitable. So just a little bit more background on me to help you get some context for this presentation for those who perhaps haven't seen a webinar with me yet. So as Paula mentioned, I started out in my career doing major international sport events. So like Olympic Winter Games, which is, this is, the best time for me. I get to start watching them from home. I worked with the Rugby World Cup and the U.S. Olympic Committee. So these are huge brands that have a massive scope, far bigger than any of us as small business owners would experience. But being able to see marketing principles operated at that level really shows you what they look like. And so 9 years ago, when I started my own business as a micro business owner, I had to figure out, how do I take these great principles of marketing that I learned, but make them work for a business that looks like mine and a business that looks like most of my clients, which is, micro businesses and other small businesses, like I'm sure many of you have as well. So when we think about marketing, a lot of times we start with the foundation of who is the audience you're trying to reach and what is the message you're trying to put out there. And then after you've been in business for a little bit and you start to really understand that piece and it becomes a rhythm for you, there are still little tweaks that you can make along the way that can help you be more effective. And that's really what this presentation is about. Marketing your business from the driver's seat is about a whole bunch of little things that you can start focusing on to see what works for you and what starts to make more of an impact. So I'm going to throw a number of different ideas at you today. And my hope is that everybody comes away with at least one thing they can do that can immediately start to up-level the way you market your business. Now, before we get into that, a few quick housekeeping items for those of you who are on live or wherever you're watching this from, if you're watching it recorded. The more you think about your business as I'm talking through the material, likely to get out of the material. So if you have something happening on your end that's distracting you, please go ahead and shut that off now if you can. So if your phone is on, or if there's a messaging device on your computer, go ahead and mute that or shut that off for the moment so that you can really focus in on what we're talking about here. If you're finding any of this material there's a full slide deck companion to this. I can make sure that you have it, and I will send that link to the SBDC team so that he can get that to you, and you can really use any of these slides as exercises for you to work on as you think about, how do I apply this material to my business? And then lastly, in terms of questions, for those of you who are on with me live, you're absolutely welcome to put questions into the chat as we go. And also at the end, I'll be saving time. There are going to be, oops, sorry, I stopped my share there. Shouldn't have done that. Let me start that again for a moment. In addition to that, there are going to be times that I ask you questions as we go along. And in those moments, whether you're on with me live or not, use that time to really think about the answer for your business. Because again, this is about helping you take the material and work it back to your business and make sure that you understand how it applies for you. So having said all of that, just to set a little foundation for what we're doing here, I find psychology very interesting in general. The more I have looked into it, the more I realize how much it actually impacts your marketing and your sales. And a lot of times when we start as business owners looking at marketing, marketing is a huge topic that it feels like you have to address for your business. So we look at the major parts of it. Where am I going to market? If you're going to spend money, how much are you going to spend on it? If you're going to spend time, how much are you going to spend on it? Who is your audience? What are you trying to say? These are some of the big questions we grapple with early on. But when you start to get into the finer details of psychology and what messages you're really sending with everything that you say, you start to look at things a little bit differently. So most of the material in this presentation is stuff that, as I've looked into it, it's made me think differently about my own marketing. And it helps me inform the people that I work with, any clients that I work with or any clients that I talk to, such as yourselves, in a way that can be, it seems like granular detail, but it has a bigger scope to it once you start implementing it. So the real main idea with this presentation is that you do have the power to position yourself. And this presentation is about the little things that you can do to take that power and make sure that you are effectively communicating what you want to communicate to your audience. So here are some of those details that we'll talk about today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about setting the voice of your brand. Now, this is part of a bigger concept, but I think that when you understand the voice of your brand, it can be a little easier to draw in the right people that you want. Then we're going to look at taking initiative with your message, actually putting it out there and beginning to send the messages that you want to send. But once you're doing that, it's not just what you say, it's also how you say it. And, using powerful language is something that you could spend an entire presentation talking just about that, but we're going to touch upon that briefly. Then we're going to talk about making strong calls to action. And this is actually my favorite part of the presentation because it looks a little bit at different personality types in the buying process. And then lastly, we'll talk about some of the ways that you can prove your worth, provide that, validation for the people who would potentially be your customers. So those are several different things that we're going to look at in today's presentation. And hopefully all of that sounds good to you. And again, we're really just looking for everybody to come away with at least one thing that opens up your mind to a new way or to market your business, or some tweaks that you can make to how you're already marketing it. So if all of that sounds good to you, let's jump in. Let's talk about marketing your business from the driver's seat. Okay, first things first, let's talk about setting the voice of your brand. And this is really an extension of a conversation about brand and target market, a conversation that we've had, right? But this is taking a finer look at the voice of your brand and what it is you're truly saying when you deliver a message. So one of the main things that I want you to understand about brand, and this is sort of the opposite of what a lot of people think brand is, your brand isn't what you think it is. It's what they think it is. They being the person receiving the message, your audience. And each of them may be receiving your message in a slightly different way. And I think this is important to understand this concept because so many times business owners will talk to me about something that's related to their brand. They'll show me a website or a business card that they've crafted, and they'll say, "What do you think of this?" And I'll say, "Oh, why did you choose the color green?" And they'll say, "Oh, because I liked it." Well, that's great that you liked it, but the more important question to start with is, what is it actually saying to the audience? And this is a really common interaction for me to have. So I know a lot of business owners are thinking about their brand from their own standpoint first. And we want to flip that model. We want you to start thinking about it as if you were one of the people receiving the message. What would this say to me if I was brand new to this audience? And if you think about it that way, it helps you stay a little bit more on track. Our goal as marketers is that we start to bridge that gap between what we think we're saying and what they think we're saying until, every time you send a message, it's exactly what you want it to be. So the more information you can gather from the people who are receiving it will help you get closer and closer to that point over time. So the question becomes, what does your brand actually represent to others? And I hope, if nothing else sticks with you in this session, this is really a main thing that I would like to stick with you, because if you come at brand thinking about your audience first, it's going to help you get a little closer to connecting with them. So we have a couple of tools that we would use to represent that. The first of which being values. And your values are ultimately the guiding principles of how your business operates. So these aren't just a few words that you think of once, you put on the about page of your website, and then you walk away from them. Sometimes thinking about your values is like, oh, what should my values be? Your values is how you're going to show up day in and day out to the people that you're serving, to any constituent groups that are ultimately going to connect with your business. And, values, when it's just you and your business, may be perhaps a little easier to define, but values also applies to businesses that have a lot of people who are customer service oriented, or facing the constituent groups that you serve. Everybody on the team should be representing the values that your business subscribes to, because that's the only way to be consistent with it. So your audience should be able to expect, okay, if this is how you showed up this time, this is what I should be expecting you to show up as in the future as well. So you can see this slide has some words that represent values, but there are quite a lot more values words out there to work with. It's important to set the stage for this because you probably have other competitors. There are probably other businesses that might be doing something similar to what you do. So what sets you apart and how you do business is part of that answer. How you do business is one of the things that shows why it's different to work with you or to choose you or to buy something from you. So one example, and I pulled a couple examples from Facebook for this. I picked, Whataburger, which when I looked through their Facebook page, a word that came to my mind was community. And it came across in a bunch of different ways, but one of the ways that it came across was that a lot of their content is fundraisers and community events that are happening. And then I looked at their website and I saw there was more there that tied in community. So if I could, at a quick glance, say, okay, I think community is a word that they subscribe to or that they're trying to subscribe to, that's something that's informing me about what I think this brand means. And, that's something that I took away from it. What do you take away from it? I mean, not only looking at this post, because this is one example of all that they have out there, but how does that combine with all the information you already have about their brand? That's where we start deciding what a brand really means. So for me, if I think of a value for them as community based, I'm going to be expecting them to have community at the forefront in much of what they do. Now, there is another tool that we have. Values is certainly one of them, but another one that we have is tone. And this, again, this is all about setting your voice, setting your style of communication. And tone is the sound of your voice, really, but sometimes that can only come across in the written word as well. So it's about the words you choose to say and how you choose to speak to people, whether in writing or verbally. And this graphic shows some example of tone words, but there's so many shades of even these words. You look at humor can come across in quite a few different ways. So sometimes it helps to pick a few tones that you want to play with to help inform you on how is it that I want to speak to the audience when I deliver my messages. Knowing this can really help you set yourself apart as well. And I often find, that tone draws people in a way that creates a strong loyalty. Like if you think about it, think for a moment, is there anybody that you follow or that you talk to when you encounter certain situations in your life? Do you have a friend or family member that you always call? Is there a talk show host that you like to watch, or a novelist, or a newspaper columnist, or is there anybody that you're regularly consuming information from that, there may be other people talking about similar topics, but you're always going to go back to this person because you like how they talk about it. You like how they make you feel when they talk about those topics. That's them creating a loyalty in you through nothing other than their tone of voice, really. And that's so powerful, so strong. So if you can imagine who does that for you, now ask yourself, how can I do that for my audience? And setting a clear tone can help you get there. So I'm going to show you an example of, sometimes we don't think about this, but when you do, and when you make a bold choice, it's really noticeable. So here's an example, and this is from quite some time ago, but I love this example. This one is Skittles. And at the time when I was looking for example of this, and I stopped everything. What a great tone of voice they've for this brand. So you look at a post like this, and it says the graphic says it's the summer bucket list for 2017, way back when, right? But it's got eat Skittles, a whole bunch of boxes that say eat Skittles. All of those are checked off. The only thing they haven't done yet is teach squirrels to talk. And then at the top, it says, I think it's safe to say I'm having a pretty successful summer. I thought this was a really interesting choice from a lot of levels. First of all, they're selling Skittles everywhere, but they're not directly selling Skittles anywhere. They're not saying buy Skittles with a price tag. They're putting it in the backdrop. They're making it really colorful. They've got the logo. It's a really vibrant looking post, which really matches their candy. It matches the color of their brand, the colors of their brand. So in many ways, they're already selling. They're just not directly selling. But then look at some of the other things they did here. There's like a quirky humor to this that they're choosing. And when we look at how they've phrased that top description, I think it's safe to say I'm having a pretty successful summer. That is a choice to make that first person, the I of it all. If you were to start reading, the Skittles posts around this time, a lot of them sounded like a diary entry. Almost in my head, it almost sounded like a teenage girl's diary entry or something like that, where it felt like a human, and it's not. It's a brand. It was a really interesting thing to work through all of the different techniques they used in this and how that made me feel, because by making Skittles sound like one person that I almost have an avatar for in my head, I start to develop a connection with it. And I don't know if you're having that reaction yourself, but those are some of the things that psychologically they're trying to do here to make it work. So tone can be a really impactful thing. And, I could have gotten off this page right after I got the example, but I found myself continuing to scroll to see how they were, how else they were using that and what other humorous types of angles they would come in with. So again, humor may not be your tone, but what is the style of communicating that you want to have with your audience? So when you think about that, I want you to take a moment, pause here. If you're on with me live, you're welcome to answer this question, in the chat. But if you're not, just take a moment to make a self-assessment. How clear are the tone and values of your brand now? Now that I've broken it down a little bit, have you thought about this before? And if not, can you start thinking about it so that you can set a clearer direction for how you communicate with your audience? So that's something to think about here. If you haven't thought about it before, that's a great place to start. Now, remember that when we're talking about taking power in your messaging today, but power comes in all kinds of packages. So it helps to start by choosing the package so that you can be consistent with your audience over time. Of all the things that we're talking about today, a lot of the other things coming up are perhaps smaller details than this one. This one is still a broad concept, but an important one to set for your business. Now, if that's something you've got a handle on and you want to move on here, now let's talk about taking initiative with your message. You really do have to plant the seed if you want it to grow. And it may sound obvious, but there's so many business owners that I talk to that are uncomfortable to put their message out there with all of their audience or a portion of their audience or one specific person who really needs their message. And so sometimes, when people are asking me for marketing advice, I say, well, make sure you're doing it. Because if you're reluctant to share your message, it's going to be really hard for it to get out there and get momentum. Nobody is going to be an ambassador for your business the way you would, right? So part of this is, if you want that seed to grow, you have to plant it first. And so we want to take that as a given. Do you have any contacts who can help you? Make sure you're approaching them. Those people who you're most reluctant to approach, those are probably the most important people for you to try to approach. So I wanted to start by saying this just because, as much as I want it to be a given, I know that it's not always a given for everybody. So put the message out there to begin with. But now let's take this a step further, because I do want to take that part as already accepted. How do we extend from there? Well, how you plant it may help that seed to grow more, may help it to grow into a bigger, healthier plant. So when we talk about the how, one of the things that comes up for me is buyer motivation. People can hear your message for however much time they're hearing it for, but what is going to be the thing that ultimately triggers them to make the purchase, to sign the contract, whatever it is you're looking for them to do? What is going to be that deciding factor, that motivation that's going to put it over the edge? Now, in this case, we're going to talk about buyer motivation in terms of your entire target market. And when we look at buyer motivation, we tend to break that down into 7 different areas. So one would be comfort or pleasure, getting comfort or pleasure from the product or service that you're selling. Another would be receiving profit or gain. It's more of an economic impact, I guess you would say, for the recipient. Another would be preventing loss, which is a really different angle from the profit or gain, but still has an economic focus. There could also be, the buyer wants to have a sense of belonging. They're looking to be part of a community in some way. Another one would be cause affiliation. A lot of times this is because a company has a target market of their own. Let's say you're selling business to business. The company has a target market of their own and they want to reach that audience. Or if you're selling business to consumer, the person is just looking for a company that's going to allow them to support the cause they want us to support. So they might choose, if they're looking at buying a product or service and they have a bunch of options, they might pick the one that feels like it's affiliating with the cause. Avoidance of pain is another one. People wanting to be safe, I guess, would be an option that we would look at there. And then lastly, we've got pride or prestige, which comes in a very different place. So when we look at this wheel of options for, let's say, selling business to business. There are certain ones that are more likely to be the buyer motivation, like profit or gain or prevention of loss. Again, cause affiliation could be one because, again, they probably want to connect with their own audience too. And so they're looking for suppliers who, or vendors or other companies to work with who affiliate with similar causes. If you're looking at this from a business to consumer standpoint, it really could be any of these ones on this chart. And it gets kind of interesting when you've got two different buyer motivations that seem different from each other. So for example, if somebody's looking to prevent loss, but they're also looking for pride or prestige, those things don't necessarily logically go together. You know, pride or prestige often comes at a price. But you know, if you know that both of those things are factors for your audience, how can you speak to that in your marketing? How can you hit them from all of those angles when you're marketing? So again, in this case, for this particular exercise, we want to use this for the entire target market. I have something I'll show you many slides ahead that will be more focused on the individuals. But in this case, we're looking at the group of your target market as a whole. So if you look back at that chart, and this is an exercise that you can do for every target market that you serve, answer the question, I will make your life better by, and then fill in that blank with something that relates to the buyer motivations on the previous slide and see what comes up for you. And how would you then use that information when you're marketing your business and talking to them in the future? Hopefully that helps you start to push it over the line for some of them, because it's another way to show your audience that you understand them. So the question for you, this is taking a moment to stop down on this particular topic and see how it applies for your business. The question is, which buyer motivation most applies for your business? If you are on with me live and you want to answer this, you are absolutely welcome to. And if you're not, take a moment now, maybe pause the presentation for a second and really think about which of these buyer motivations are relevant for your business. And if you've got multiple target markets, which we know many of us do, it's probably going to be a different buyer motivation or more than one buyer motivation for each audience that you serve. So how would you look at that? How would you break that down for each of them? So this is something to think about that'll just help you tweak your language, and maybe you can try throwing in some new ways of speaking to them that may connect with them, and you can start to see what works for you. Now, once you've done that, we're going to get even more granular, because the words you choose to say have a pretty significant impact. So using powerful language, you may have heard of power language before. And in fact, honestly, if you could have an entire presentation just about this topic. So I'm not going to pretend that you're going to come away with every single thing that you need, but I'm hoping that I introduce some ideas to you that if this is interesting to you, you'll go and research more about power language, because power language is ultimately about the nuances in what you say, the word choices that you make, and how that shows the strength of your delivery and the strength of your positioning when you're talking to somebody. So what we want to be able to do in our businesses is to project strength over weakness. The clearer, the more concisely you can talk, the more directly you can talk, the stronger the message ultimately is. So having said that, the word strength, I think, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I wanted to layer this idea for you. You can have all of these things and still be strong, right? Vulnerability and respect and confidence, there's like a Venn diagram here, you know. Confidence and vulnerability, well, if you can meet that with planning, you know, vulnerability and respect, well, if you can meet that with asking for or giving support, respect and confidence, can you turn that into a partnership? And can all of this merge into having mutual benefit? You know, strength can come from sharing something you're vulnerable about, but how do you project it? How do you talk about it? So be aware that when I say strength versus weakness, it's not necessarily that you can't have a real moment or be relatable to your audience. It's not that you have to overpower them, but it's about being direct with your message And when you look at some examples of power words, it starts to show you how we get there. So I'm going to actually show you a slide that looks like this with different words. So I'll kind of walk you through two different examples of this slide to show you the power words versus the words that come across as weaker. Here's some examples of power words in marketing. And again, you could find so many examples for this that people dig into. A power word would be, for example, result. Okay, let me just show you what's actually going to happen as a result of you working with me. It gives people a rooted sense in what the value is. You is a powerful word in marketing because it puts the focus on your audience. As we've said, that's very important. Advantage, again, similar to result, it's showing what the value is going to be to them. Avoid, this is also showing value proposition, but remember, avoiding pain is one of our buyer motivations. So this could trigger some people. Only. Now, only can come across in different ways, but only as a power word here would be showing scarcity. So if you said, this is only available for 3 days, or this is only $3.99, it only really sort of, I'm going to say, manages expectations for your audience in a way that helps you soften your sell. Proven. Again, we're showing results. We're showing value to the audience. Agree. You know, a lot of times when you see speakers who are doing NLP techniques, neuro-linguistic programming techniques, they're literally trying to get the audience to agree. They want head nods in the audience. They want people saying yes. Not everybody works with this same exact principle of selling, but a lot of people who sell do try to get this head nod, this agreement. So agree is a big power word for us to work with. And because as well, if a lot of times the word because is meeting somebody's objections head on. You should do this because let me address your objections so that you don't have it anymore, or that I take away a reason for you not to want this. So these are some examples of words that can help you position yourself with power. Now, overall, power words can spark your imagination. They can encourage trust. They can create scarcity, like we saw a little bit with that word only. They can help emphasize value. A lot of times, value, showing value to the audience, is what brings power back into your pitch. Now, having said that, you know, and this, when you're looking at the slides later, you can sort of layer on top of the power words, the weak words, and you probably will be able to spot the ones that I use here and that I try to weed out of my own language. Here's some examples of those weak words. So as opposed to the result of it all, what does the word try tell you? I'm going to try to do this. Okay, well, are you going to do it or not? What can I expect from you? I is another weak word when it comes to selling, because they don't care about they care about themselves, right? They care about the you of it all. They care about, how is this going to impact me as an audience member, not how is this going to impact the business owner. Sort of, you'll see I use that a whole bunch. So I have to always sort of like give myself a little like imaginary electroshock when I say some of these things. Sort of softens, and we want to be careful about that. Also, almost does the same thing. You know, is it really there, or is it almost there? Tell me what I should be able to expect from you. Just is an interesting word. Just can be used in a lot of different ways, but if you're using this to qualify yourself or to soften yourself, just checking in to see if you're doing, you know, like I just thought I'd write to see if you, be careful about how much you're throwing just in. And the people who use just a lot. I've had to monitor my use of the word just, and sometimes it's appropriate and sometimes it's being used because you don't feel you belong somewhere and you're qualifying yourself. Think, if I circle back around here, is it really going to happen, or do you just think it's going to happen? I'm going to come back to help me in just a moment. In my opinion is another one. In my opinion could be an important legal phrase to use at times, but you also have to be careful because it can raise the question for your audience of, well, is this going to happen or not? Is this something that I should expect, or is this just your opinion? I'm circling back here to help me because I've actually heard this be people's sales pitch before. And again, this has nothing to do with your audience. So unless you're a nonprofit with a fundraiser, and honestly, still help me is a really tough place to come from, because what is the value to them? How are you helping the cause? How are you helping them? Not just how are you helping yourself? So these are all some words that you can potentially think about. Are there any words that you use a lot that you want to start monitoring in your own language? So weak words, as a summary, they'll probably deprioritize your listener and prioritize yourself instead. They'll show uncertainty when uncertainty isn't needed. And again, legally, sometimes uncertainty is needed if we can't make a claim for sure, but it's not a very strong sales pitch. So we have to be careful about walking that line. And of course, it can potentially reduce value because your audience wants to know, how is this going to make my life better? So tell them. And if you can be direct about it, do it. So now, having said that, we want to take this even a step further and talk about making strong calls to action, because this is where your power language ultimately shines. Now, we want to take not just all those words and the buyer motivations, but we've been talking this whole time about your target market, all the many faceless people in your target market. But there will come a point when you get into a one-on-one conversation, either face-to-face verbally or in writing. However that comes across, it will hopefully eventually become a one-to-one conversation, which is your sales process. And in your sales process, there are different personality types. And each of those different personality types are convinced by completely different language. So for me, this is actually, I think I told you up front, this is my favorite part of this presentation, because this type of information is what has allowed me to change my business. Let me actually show you that there are 4 different buyer personas, or what we would call social styles. And this chart that I'm going to show you on the next slide is a composite chart I put together of information about those 4 different buyer personas. I will say that I believe I've seen a similar model taken with like personal relationships. And so I think you'll probably see this replicated in some other industries as well. But from a buyer persona standpoint, or from a selling standpoint, here's what we would call these social styles. We've got the analytical, the expressive, the amiable, and the driver. All 4 of these types of people are completely different types of people. And all of these people could be sitting within one target market. So looking at selling in this way is very informative to connect you to who you are and to who the person you're talking to is, and to figure out, how can I communicate more effectively with this individual if I want to at all. So let's look at these. The analytical is very data driven. They have a process. They're very logic oriented. They're going to be organized. With these people, give them facts and figures, give them information, give them proof, and then walk away and give them time. Give them time to process it on their own. The pushier you are, the more suspicious you might make them. On the opposite end of this spectrum is actually bottom right, the expressive. So the expressive is emotionally driven as a buyer. They might be more impulsive. They're going to be thinking big picture. They're often thinking ambitiously or creative. Again, this is big picture. They're thinking about the broad strokes of it all. And when you see emotional marketing, these are the people who tend to be more motivated by that. So already by describing those 2, I believe, polar opposites, you can see how different your approach would need to be in reaching each of those people, because an emotional message would be effective for the expressive and it would drive your analytical person away. And what works for the analytical would drive your expressive away. Now, if we look at the other two, we've got the driver on the top right. And the word that I think of with is competition. They're going to be decisive, but they want to win. They want to win over their competitors. They want to win over who they were yesterday. They want to win maybe over you as the seller. They're going to be dominant in the sales conversation, probably strong-willed. So they're going to know what they want, and they're going to be going for the success of it all. On the opposite end of the spectrum, to me, would be the amiable, which when I think about this one, they're looking to make a friend in the process, perhaps with you as a seller. So, they want that cooperation. They don't want conflicts. They're looking to have a supportive conversation, and for their choices to be accepted. And again, to me, the driver and amiable, two different styles of selling. There's a much softer approach with the amiable, and you have to think about how you're going to approach it with the driver. With any of these, if you can imagine for yourself somebody that that's 100% of any of these things, it helps you put an avatar in your brain for what that style would be. I will say, though, not everybody is 100% of any of these things. You might be dominantly one of them with a bit of another one mixed in. So that's what makes it really interesting, because people can have these nuances to what they need to hear from you. And the more you understand about what they want, and the quicker you can figure out which social style you're dealing with, the more likely you'll be able to get through to them. Now, when I first saw this, it actually empowered me in my business, because one thing is, when you look at this, you might quickly realize which one you are. And knowing that will help you figure out, this is how I'm usually approaching people. So I am an analytical, and very likely that means that how I write, how I talk is going to be analytical, and it's probably going to attract analyticals. But when I'm talking to somebody else, how do I match their energy? And do I want to? There was a time in my business when I was having a really hard time closing certain types of leads, and I was very frustrated with myself, and I was sort of beating myself up about it. And I thought, I need to build my sales skills. I need to go and get a lot of information about sales. And I started doing that. And then I saw something like this model, and I realized most of the people that I'm having a hard time closing are the 100% drivers and the 100% expressives. And then I thought to myself, okay, so let's say I can find a way to match their energy and close that deal. That's what that relationship is going to look like forever. So do I want it? And that was a really new take on it for me. If the answer is yes, you want to reach that hard to reach for you person, great. Learn the skills that you need to talk to them in the way that they need to be talked to. If you don't want those relationships, you can steer away from it and use language that appeals to the other types. So this is something to consider. And I hope this opens up a new world for you when you think about how to market your business. This is something I still think about. So even just talking about it in one session won't answer all the questions, but hopefully it helps you formulate your initial questions so you can do more digging and decide, who is it I actually want to attract in my business? If you said, I want all of these people, then your marketing should have all of this different type of language in it so that you're hooking in each of these people at different times. So this is something to consider. And the question to start with, is, which social style are you? Because when you know that, you'll know what you gravitate towards. So this could be something, if you're on with me live, you're absolutely welcome to put your initial reaction to that in the chat, and we can see who we've got here. Like I said, I'm an analytical. Who are you? But if you're not on live, just take a moment, start with that level before you start looking at who is everybody else. Assess yourself, and it'll help give you information about what am I already putting out there. And we've already got an amiable, expressive in the audience. That's great. So yeah, this gives you a lot of information, even about you and what works for you when you're on the other side of the sales process. So one more thing I wanted to point out about this, adaptability is part of your strength. Being able to merge between those different types of people is part of your strength, but identify it first and really decide, how much do I want to adapt to these different styles? We've also got an analytical and amiable in the audience. I'm not sure what I'm cut with. I would say analytical and driver are probably more of mine, but I'd have to think about what the lesser, the less dominant version is for me. So let's talk about the last piece here, and that's proving your worth. Because no matter who you're talking to, any of those different social styles, for example, they're going to want validation before they make a decision. Everybody wants validation when they're trying to find out what they want to buy, whether it be a product or a service, whether they're signing a contract. They want to know that they're making a good choice. And if you look back at those social styles, you'll probably see that everybody's looking for different information from you, right? The emotional decision maker is going to be is going to perceive validation from different things than the analytical will. So, when you look at that, what do you need to tell people to show them that validation, to show them that this is a good choice for you, buying whatever it is you sell? So one of the things that I want to say here before I break this down for you is please don't hide from your leverage. I can't tell you how many times I have heard business owners say, oh, I could tell them about this, but I don't want to toot my own horn. Toot your own horn. You have to find a way to do it, right? Because people need to know that you're good at what you do. They need to know that your business is reputable. They need to know that your products and services are valid and worthy and good quality. That they might need to know that other people have worked with you or believe in you. So, when you have leverage, find some way to get that across, even if you have to do it humbly. That's fine. There's a lot of ways to soften the things that you want to say that to your horn. You can thank people for their help. You can express honor, about an achievement that you've had. You can find ways to soften it, but still get the point across, because leverage is important. People are looking for social proof. That's why we have review sites. That's why people ask for recommendations from friends. That's why people look for testimonials. They want to know what their experience is going to be before they have the experience themselves to decide if they want to work with you or buy something from you. So the more you can provide that social proof, that validation from whoever you can, whatever forces you can gather, the stronger a pitch you're going to be able to make. And again, when you look back at those different personality types, you can start to think about, okay, it's not just about all the social proof. If I'm trying to attract an amiable, what is it that's going to mean something to them? If you're trying to attract a driver, what's the proof that's going to mean something to them? So this is something that you can layer into those personality types. I'd like to give you some examples of social proof. And this is something that this is a subset of examples. There may be more that you can think of for your business. And not everybody is going to have all of these things to play with, but start where you are. And as over time, you'll have more and more things to say about your business. So some of the things you might be able to say, well, you could talk about the number of employees you have. That matters because it's showing, oh, you must have, oh, wow, you've got a bunch of employees. You must be doing really well. Makes me think that it's worth checking out what you've got. On the other hand, it could be number of years in business. If you've been in business for a long time, there must be a reason why your business has succeeded this long. Number of clients. That could be something that shows people, oh, a lot of people have made this great choice to work with you. And actually, if not number of clients, maybe you have a small number of clients, but they keep coming back. So maybe you talk about number of projects that you keep doing with these great clients that keep coming back. Circling back up to the top, followers, visitors, engagement stats. There are some things like social media where they'll see that visually, they'll be able to see that information. But this is also something that you can share with people, any exciting news that you have to show volume around people engaging with your business. Awards, like type of awards or number of awards, that can also be something because somebody felt that you were good enough to get those awards. So that's an external validation, as is speaking gigs or content that's published. Anytime you can say, look, this other great company or business or service or organization decided, they wanted to bring me in as an expert. Well, that's saying something about you, right? Now, charities you support on a couple levels, this is interesting because not only do you affiliate with the cause, as we talked about with the buyer motivation, but you're also sort of connecting your brand in a way with theirs, and you're showing that you're doing well enough to support the charity. So that hits on many levels. Testimonials and referrals, that's probably the first one that people would think about here in terms of social proof. And then community partnerships. Anytime you can go out and cross market with or collaborate with another organization or a business or an influencer, any of those community partners, you start to I guess, link brands in a way, or at least link it in people's brains. So think about the people that you go out and approach about partnerships. Now, with all of that having been said, not everybody is going to be able to do all of those things upfront. So start where you are, like I said, and build from there. Over time, you will have more and more to say about your business. So use any details now that show your strength. And hopefully each passing year, you'll have more and more things to say, especially if you start looking for more things to say. If you can look at that chart and you can say, okay, I bet I can work on this year, then maybe next year you have something to say about one of those elements that you didn't have this year. So use those details to your own horn as much as you need to show people that your business is solid, that you've got good quality products or services, that you have, a community around you. All of that helps inform your audience. So I do want to make sure I save enough time for questions here. Here's a reminder of what we talked about today in case this sparks your questions. We talked about setting the voice of your brand. That's where we looked at tone and values. Then we talked about taking initiative with your message, of course, putting your message out there, but also how you use that buyer motivation and tap into it to encourage somebody to make the sale. Then we talked about using powerful language, some of those power words versus weak words. Then we looked at strong calls to action in relation to personality types and how those 4 different personality types mesh with your sales process. And then lastly, we talked about proving your worth, showing that social proof to validate people's choices. So feel free to take some time now to write your questions into the chat if you're on with me live, or we can talk them through. I do want to remind you though, if you do have questions about any of this and you want to work it through, the SVDC is there. So feel free to connect with them and see if you can get an appointment in the books to work through some of these details. The link that I have on this slide is the link to get to their website so that you can go about making an appointment, or at least discover more if you want to investigate it. So make sure that you check that out if you want to explore this more, but we'll tackle as many questions as we can on live here as well, in case there's anything that's immediately coming to your mind. So with that, I'll turn this back over to Paula as well, in case she wants to say anything.
Oh, I've been making notes throughout this whole thing. This is great. Let's see, you were talking about people that you listen to or like channels, maybe a certain news channel that you listen to, because that's what you have the most confidence in. And I thought about, okay, I like Dr. Phil. I like him because he gets to the point, he gets straight to the point, and his accent, I love his accent. So that kind of draws me into him. And I wanted to also mention talking about target market and the different ways to find your target market. I have a friend that was a market researcher. Well, now she has a business where she sells, we'll say jewelry. She sells jewelry. And she went to a concert where the median age was like, it was a Sting concert. So we're talking 50s, 60s, something like that. Nobody mentioned her jewelry that she was wearing, and she wore it strictly to see what kind of response that she would get. But when she goes to an area of town where the median age is like 30, then they're all over her going, oh, where did you get that? I love that piece that you're wearing. So it's just finding that target market and then figuring out, okay, do I want to spend a whole lot of time trying to bring those 40, 50, 60-year-olds to my side, my way of thinking, or do I spend a lot of time selling my product to those people that I already know want it?
Those are such great points. Well, first of all, going back to the Dr. Phil comment, that starts to show you there's so many people out there who talk about, in books you can read, articles you can read. There's so many people out there who deal with similar subject matter as Dr. Phil, but Dr. Phil has a very specific way of communicating, and that hooks you in. So, and you don't necessarily have to choose. It can be an and situation where you listen to Dr. Phil and you consume information from other people, yet you still want to go back to Dr. Phil because you like the way that he delivers the information. So I always find it so interesting how much loyalty tone can create. How much you want to keep hearing what those people have to say when you like the way they say what they say. So it's setting a clear tone is a big choice to make in a business, but it has the impact of drawing people in who want to be connected to you. And to your point about the target markets, it's why it's so important to look into things like this, because I think when people start their businesses, they begin by putting messages out there in the broadest way possible. It's like, if I can reach 1 million people, that's better than 1,000 people. But is it? Is it actually better to reach the 1,000 people if those 1,000 people are the only ones who would be most likely to buy what you sell? So the more we can break things down, and hopefully with a presentation like this, because we can look at target market head on, and brand head on as we've done. But this stuff is a little more nuanced, and sometimes it helps you find a new angle in that. If you just tweak what you're doing a little bit, you suddenly find it being more effective. So we're looking for those little tricks to refine marketing. And in this case of the jeweler, or the person who makes jewelry, just where she chose to spend her time, put her in front of different people who were either more or less receptive. So it really does go to show you efficiency matters. And all these things combine into potential more sales.
Uh, Melissa, if I may, this is Roger. I just want to maybe build on something that Paula said just for a minute.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, uh, marketing kind of is emotional, right? And you're trying to put that emotion into it. And one of the things I kind of heard you talk about was the power language. So how do you kind of use that power language in an emotional sell? And then the second part of the question is, do you specifically target the expressive personalities, or can that power language maybe adapt to the other personalities?
Well, I would say the power language is universal because word choice is still word choice, but style of your pitch can be different. So if you're still giving them the results, if you're still giving them the focus on how this is going to improve their lives, if you're going to be strong with showing them real tangible details and value and facts, by saying things like, by avoiding words like try, instead of saying, I'm going to try to do this, like this will blank. I think that already changes the packaging of how your message comes across. But when we look at the expressive versus the analytical versus the driver versus the amiable, and you think about emotional selling, do you then take those power words and do you put sadness into it? or do you put joy into it, or do you put fear into it? So layering that emotion on top of it, you can still have strong words with anybody that you talk to, but do you talk about winning with the driver? Do you talk about, here are the facts, the details, the stats? Here's a list of reports you can read with the analytical, with the expressive. Can you tap into their fear or their sadness or their joy? With the amiable, can you tap into their need to build the relationship? So I think you can put power language with any of those.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Because I thought about Paula's comment about Dr. Phil. And when I personally think of Dr. Phil, it feels very emotional because it feels like that's exactly what he tries to touch, almost every word in the sentence that he makes. And so I was just kind of curious about that. So thank you.
Emotional and expressives, my goodness, it's amazing how impactful that can be. But you use that same language on an analytical, and it makes us suspicious. So you make your choice when you make a bold choice like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. It was great.
Oh, I'm so glad.
One of my favorite Dr. Phil isms is, how's that working out for you? It's like somebody's always doing something and doing the same thing and complaining because they never get what they want. Well, how's that working out for you? Okay.
Absolutely.
And talking about power words, you've mentioned only, and I keep going back to these uh, uh, as seen on TV, order it now. If you order within the next 5 minutes, you'll get, but you see that same commercial every 30, 40, 50 minutes. So it's only available now. Um, and then you talked about try. You said don't try. And I had to come back to do or do not. There is no try.
I mean,
You
who said it better than Yoda?
exactly, exactly.
Absolutely.
And
That's great marketing wisdom that he shared.
exactly, there is no try. But going back to another one of those not so powerful words, help me. If you turn it around, you can actually use it in a very powerful way to get your person to talk, to get your potential customer to talk to you. I've used it when trying to get information from someone. Help me understand.
Hmm.
Instead of, why did you do this? It's help me understand what drove you to this. So just how you spin all of that
Hmm.
is often makes 100% of the difference. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And just the help me by itself is a plea for me. But when you say help me understand you, is
mhm,
a bridge, right? So already you can see how impactful the addition of a word is there. Yeah, I just find all of it so interesting. And if power language, if that section was interesting to anybody, there's so much information out there to research about all different types of word choices. You could spend a while going down that rabbit hole, but the more you can find the words that you want to work on yourself, it's
mhm.
just a little thing to start rewiring. And it has an impact over time.
It absolutely does. You're right. It is so interesting to learn more and more about that. So before we get to the rest of our housekeeping here, let's see. Um, let's see. Brett is saying, you say when I got your slide. Brett, you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Actually, I said, thank you, Melissa, for a great finish to this series. And then I said privately to Paula, you let me know when you need your final slide.
Oh, sorry about that. How about now? How about now?
Very good.
That was a
Sorry.
good segue.
It was. Melissa, do you have anything else you'd like to close with?
No, thank you all for being here, and I can't wait to see what you have coming up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm really excited about everything that we've got coming up. Some really good stuff. I just want to remind everyone that you'll be getting a survey. And if you would please fill out that survey, let us know how we're doing and how we can improve our program. Um, and yeah, Brett has pulled up this slide. Thank you, partner. Just want to talk about our upcoming webinars. We've got one this afternoon. Team decisions, how to get them right. Great series that Lorna Kibbe's been doing for us. And then, oh yeah, it's tax season. So let's talk some more about income tax for small businesses. We've got Rebecca Schultz, Intro to Tax Filing for Small Businesses, and then another presenter talking about, Angela Randolph, talking about business owner tax responsibilities. So we've got a lot of great information coming up on that. And then let's talk about some customer service. Make a Great Day by Anna Hay. And then Rebecca is putting together an orientation for how to work with the North Central Texas SBDC office. Ought to be some great stuff, talking about the resources that we can provide and how we can actually help the business owner. And Lorna continuing her series next week, team building activities you can do. Great series she's been providing. And Melissa, your information is always so in depth and so well, it's information that we can put into action right now. And we really appreciate everything that you've done for us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Looking at that slide, there's a QR code up in the upper right-hand corner. That'll take you right to our Eventbrite page where you can actually register for our upcoming webinars. Also, if you go to our SBDC website, sbdc.nctc.edu, you can also register for those webinars. You can get contact information. You can schedule an appointment with an advisor. You can also use some of the resources we already have out there. It's a very powerful website that we have. We're very grateful to NCTC for helping us with that. And speaking of about all of our benefactors, I mentioned that we are grant funded, and I'd like to thank the Small Business Administration, the state of Texas, North Texas SBDC Regional Office, North Central Texas College for funding our center, and we really do appreciate all the support we get from them. I want to thank you all today for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you this afternoon for Lorna Kibbe's presentation. We're going to go ahead and end the webinar. Everyone stay warm. Enjoy the snow from the inside. It's great. It's beautiful out there, but it's awfully cold. So this is going to end the webinar. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.